Current research consistently indicates that anxiety is on the rise among adults and young adults. For parents, those headlines, they can feel overwhelming. Well, we're going to share an important finding with you that may help prevent excess anxiety in your children as they grow older. It's not trauma or divorce or loss that impacts children the most. Studio 5 parenting contributor Heather Johnson will tell us the biggest predictor of anxiety. Welcome, Heather.
Thanks.
This is actually really, I'm just telling you, kind of something we experienced this morning. Tell us, what is the number one predictor?
The number one predictor is children who are raised by a hurried parent are more likely to experience anxiety and even chronic anxiety later in their life as an adult.
Shocking.
This is a huge, we're making a really, really big statement by saying this, right? You mentioned trauma, divorce, loss, and all of those things can impact our children and their anxiety as they grow older. But to know that the biggest factor that impacts anxiety later in life for our kids is being raised by a hurried parent.
Yeah.
If anything, we should all stop just right now and take a big deep breath and consider where we're contributing here, what we can change, what we can do different, because this is a big deal and we can do something about this. Now remember, we can't guarantee what our children's adult lives look like, but we can right now kind of just do a gut check for a minute and ask if we're contributing here.
And I think this is something that maybe we don't think about in the moment, right? Because everything is happening so fast. As parents, we do have to get places on time, and kids seem to slow that down. That is something that is very normal. They're supposed to do that, they're kids. But what are maybe the more characteristics of a hurried parent in general?
Yeah, because we hear that word, right? And there is that element to it. There is that rush, let's go, come on, get your shoes out the door.
Totally.
There is that to it, and that's part of it. But even bigger than this is a hurried parent is someone who is introducing their children to things that are above and beyond their age and ability, meaning pushing them to hurry and grow up faster, right, than they need to, or that they should, or that's good for them, right? It's including our kids in conversations that are too adult for them. It's having them so overscheduled, and not just them, but their lives overscheduled and also our lives overscheduled, so that there isn't any downtime. This is the mother, this is the dad, the parent who is not finding enough family time for their families to be together. This is thinking that extrinsic matters more than intrinsic, right? So it's the parent who's saying, wait, the grades and the instruments you play and the languages you speak, they decide if you're enough. And then we talk to our kids differently, right? If they got an A or an F, we address them differently. That's a hurried parent. So yes, it is about the pace, but that pace is a byproduct of all of those other things that are happening behind the scenes. And when we raise our kids that way, they're more likely to experience anxiety as an adult. There's a lot of things that impact them, right? If we go to kind of what that looks like for our kids when they get older.
Yeah.
These are then adults who have a hard time with relationships. They have lower self-esteem because they're tying their worth to their performance, right? So when something goes wrong, when they're not able to accomplish, they find themselves stepping back and saying, well, I'm not good enough and I can't believe in myself because of that. With relationships, they have a hard time with emotional control. They don't know how to create a really healthy work-life balance as they get older. It goes on and on, not to mention that all of this is under the umbrella of anxiety, right? So that fear of what could happen that they can't control, which means they then become adults who feel like they have to control everything because that's the only way that they can ward off the anxiousness.
Okay.
So there is a lot to this, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot to this.
You know what, and I think as a parent and as women sometimes, we tend to, again, we talk about this a lot, make this about ourselves, right? And say, oh my gosh, I've ruined my child. They are just gonna struggle for the rest of their lives. You're telling us that big deep breath?
Yep.
There's hope.
Absolutely.
There's things we can do right now, and you're gonna give us the tools. What's the first thing we can do as parents?
Well, first, we want to think long-term, and we want to make sure that our minds are thinking long-term. Now, here's what this looks like on the day-to-day. It's really easy to make decisions today according to what today is requiring, and think that we're making really great decisions today, and not realizing that although those decisions will get us through right now, they might not be the best decisions for our kids down the road. Right? And so we're going to maybe hurry them, get them involved in a lot of things today thinking, well, this is what needs done. We want to ask ourselves, are the choices that we're making right now today, are they actually going to benefit them long term? We will often find that they don't necessarily benefit the way that we think. The other thing we want to do when it comes to long term is we want to consider our motives. Oftentimes we are hurried parents because we're allowing what's happening or what our kids are doing to decide if we're enough. right? And so if they get the grades, if they make the team, if the room is always clean, if they're achieving in certain ways, then that means that we've done a good job. And so we hurry them and push them beyond their age and ability. We hurry them to grow up, and we find that we're doing that so that our own anxiety or our own fears are taken care of. We don't want to push them because we're dependent on what they do for us to be okay.
How do we know when they're ready? How do we know when they're ready for that next step or when we're not hurrying them? What does that look like?
Yeah, it looks like taking into consideration, obviously, where they're at. And that's going to happen first if we can take a step back and say, why am I pushing? Am I pushing because this is something that I need?
Yeah.
We have to take a really solid, hard look at that. And then we can look at our kids and we want to create some balance. And what that balance or where that comes from is it's allowing there to be the grace and the age and the play and the fun, as well as I want you to learn, I want you to achieve.
Yeah.
Anytime we get imbalanced, when we put too much energy into one thing at the expense of all of those other really great things about being a kid, we run into trouble. And so we want to keep that balance. We also want to make sure that we are trusting the process. You know, we are quick to say kids are wired to play. They're wired to be unstructured. We say these things, but we don't actually trust that that's the case. We don't trust that play is the best teacher for our kids. We just don't, right?
Yeah.
We say it and then we make their lives such that they don't have time to play, that everything is structured. It's time for us to trust that process. They're wired that way. Let's trust it and let them get involved and play and have that downtime and unstructured and hang out with friends and make messes and cause trouble and run around the neighborhood and do all the things.
Be kids.
And let's watch as it actually is the best teacher for them. They are wired to be taught that way. Let's give it a test. Let's see what happens when we trust the process.
It's so good. Next, I love this one, more family time. We underestimate that, don't we?
We do, we underestimate it. And what we find is that if we're not together as a family, it means that we're all overscheduled in individual pursuits. It tends to mean that, right? There's those two things. We're either together or else everyone is separate.
Yeah.
And so to be very, very deliberate in our family time, to make sure that it's scheduled in. Remember, family is the best place for our kids to learn something, this schoolroom, right?
Yeah.
It's where they learn to manage emotions. It's where we teach them. It's where we have interactions and they become comfortable with themselves. It's also the place where they can be seen and accepted the very best.
I love that.
So we want this environment most often where they come to know, hey, I'm enough simply because I exist, because this is who I am and I'm loved for that. Opposed to, hey, if you get that A, or if you master that instrument, or if this recital or team, if you make it the way I want you to, that's going to create worth. We want them to just exist with us. And being together as a family gives them an opportunity to say, hey, look at these people who accept me just as I am. That's what family time does. We want more of that, more of that.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. Next, more downtime.
More downtime. And again, we've got to schedule it.
Yeah.
If we don't schedule downtime, we won't ever have it.
Yeah.
And we feel that as adults, right?
That's so true.
We unfortunately have to actually work it into our lives. It's that important. Now, here's the thing. We tend to think for our kids and for ourselves as adults, and remember, we're not good examples of this. We're not good examples to our kids of what downtime actually looks like.
Right.
We need to be. We tend to think downtime is an amount of time. It's not about the amount of time. It's about what we do when we step away from the obligations.
Okay.
Downtime should be an opportunity for our kids to recharge so they can go back to school with more energy and confidence.
Okay.
It should be choosing things during that time that help us go back to the everyday responsibilities with the energy, sharper, more ready.
Yes.
That's what downtime does. It isn't wasted time. It isn't necessarily doing nothing unless the doing nothing is what recharges us.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be monumental amounts of time. It is about what we choose during that time. So sit down with your kids and ask them, hey, what does a recharge look like for you? Let's make sure you have this every day.
Yeah.
And then be really good examples. This is such a cool opportunity for us to say, hey, this is what I know recharges me. So let me share that with you. Let's figure out what recharges you. And then let's make sure that we have time for that every day. So that, again, we're plugging ourselves back in to say, what do I need so that I can go back and tackle the things that life requires? Kids have those same things just like we do.
So good, Heather. 30 seconds left. Last, you say create routines.
The more routines, the more predictability. When things are predictable, kids feel safe.
Yeah.
When that safety is a part of their lives, They learn to trust. They learn to manage emotions. They learn to communicate. They can build relationships. It also takes away our need to constantly be hurrying them. When they know what to expect, when each morning looks similar, when bedtime looks similar, when you pick them up from school and they can trust what's going to happen over the next couple hours, they can enact those things without us saying, go do this, get this done, have you done? And now we're pushing and hurrying and forcing again.
Yeah.
It lets us take a step back and they can take a step back. Plus, it gives them a great deal of control over their lives. And when they feel that control and they feel like they're in charge, they feel like we trust them, that we're encouraging them and recognizing their age and their ability. And so there isn't that power struggle all the time when our lives are made into those routines. If we want to make it even better, we can turn those routines into rituals by adding meaning. And as soon as we do that, again, kids don't feel the anxiousness of the hurry, and they don't become hurried kids because we are no longer hurried parents. It's big, and
It's big.
we can do something every day to help with this, every day.
I feel less anxious as a mother knowing these steps in order to that. Heather, so good. Thank you so much. If you'd like to contact Heather for counseling, you find her information on our website.